That was Amitabh Kant, the G20 Sherpa, giving us the story of what went into the consensus of New Delhi declaration. As we speak, live pictures coming in from Bharat Mandapam, Prime Minister Modi, President Murmu there with the guests there. Remember, at 7:30, the dinner that is hosted by President Murmu will begin. The majestic Nataraj statue there in all its glory. Abhijit, what a sight it is. The Bharat Mandapam lit up properly. You heard the backstory of the effort that India put into ensuring that the Delhi Declaration is adopted, and now it is time for dinner diplomacy.
I think they deserve their well-earned dinner right now, including apparently a course on millets. But let's just admire what's happened here. Everybody said this was not possible. We've got agreement on 112 points, which is what? It's something like between 2 times the number of tangibles that was agreed to in any previous G20 summit, and it's 5 times the number of working documents, which means it's gone into much greater detail than any previous G20 summit has. Now, let's just come to appreciate the beauty of all of this, because since we've been talking all day, we should also take a rest. This is such a pretty building. They put in so much thought and effort into it. During the daytime, it looks so nice. During the evening, it looks even nicer. And, unfortunately for me, Pranesh, we have to bring this up. The amount of hate this has been getting and the naysayers is really irritating. In this country, you can't offer somebody something good, nice, accomplished and finished and still not have them sneer at you. And at some point, that's a really irritating negative aspect that needs to go.
Let's also talk about the larger point that came out of this meeting. Prime Minister Modi, while speaking from a position of strength, said that this is not an era of war. Abhijit.
He's been very clear about that. I think that has been India's position throughout. Remember, we never supported the American invasion of Iraq. We've never supported the American regime change that happened in Libya. We never supported the regime change that they tried in Kosovo and Serbia as well. If you remember, George Fernandez, the then defense minister, actually came out and held a julus with the Yugoslav ambassador in Delhi at that time. We've moved away a lot from that kind of activism. Now Indian diplomacy has become very quiet. We condemn, but we don't use harsh words. I don't think there's anything to be gained using harsh words, and that is what has brought us to this position where, going from pointless Nehruvian diffidence and grandstanding, we make our point very clearly in a very mature way, in which case people then respect you and appreciate you for not playing a demagogue but telling people to their face that you disapprove in a very polite fashion.
All right, on that note, let's take a break. Professor Nalapat and Sushant Sareen will be joining us after the short break. Viewers, please stay with Times Now. This is Times Now India. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The grand celebrations of 75 countries coming together to shape the world's future is in full swing at Bharat Mandapam as we speak. Pictures coming in of the world leaders arriving for the presidential dinner. Prime Minister Modi is also there, President Murmu alongside the guests who are coming in. And if you see the backdrop, and this is what I was talking about, if you see the backdrop behind Prime Minister Modi and President Murmu, you had Konark Wheel when world leaders were being greeted by Prime Minister Modi. That was in the morning. But in the evening, what you see is the Nalanda Mahavira. This was in operation between the 5th and the 12th century. Its legacy goes back to Buddha's and Mahavira's era, reflecting ancient India's advancement towards disseminating knowledge and wisdom. Let's open this up. Professor Nalapat, Sushant Sareen. Sushant Sareen, to you first. The declaration has been adopted. You've seen the kind of commentary on social media already. Your 2 big takeaways from it.
I think the biggest takeaway is, of course, the fact that, despite all the negative propaganda that was taking place, the Indian diplomacy came into its own and was able to hammer together this document, a consensus document, as Mr. Amitabh Kant very correctly says. And I think that's a great achievement. But I think equally important is the number of, so that was on the contentious issues, but the number of issues in which there is this audacity of ambition which is reflected in this document. And I think that is extremely important, that you are trying to push the envelope, you are trying to take things forward, you are trying to bring in a lot of very critical issues on the table for the most economically powerful countries in the world and the most pivotal countries in the world. And I think that is the second big takeaway. You can go into the nitty-gritty, of what all has been decided, from climate to debt to, terrorism, you name the things, and those things have been dealt with. And the fact that it was not only a consensus on those very contentious issues like Ukraine, but also, things like debt and other stuff, which is bedeviling many countries around the world. When you bring those onto the table, there will become some carping sounds from some of the countries. But to be able to develop a consensus even around those issues, I think that's a remarkable achievement. And then, of course, the fact that this is a document which, and this is something where I would have a slightly different interpretation from what Mr. Amitabh Kant was telling Navika. I don't think we were the voice of the South, global South. I think what we were doing was becoming the bridge between the global South and the global North. There was a time when we were the South of the voice of the global South, the NAM summit, and when we were the defenders of all the lost causes, when, as Abhijit was earlier saying, we would be out on the streets talking about Ho Chi Minh, and I forget the slogan, maybe Dr. Nalapat will remember those slogans. Ho 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 Chi Minh, we shall fight, we shall win. It was somebody else's war and we were jumping into it. We were doing all of that. But today what we are doing is we are talking about much more developmental oriented things. We are talking about how sustainable development can take place around the world without countries funding that development, indulging in predatory practices like the Chinese do, without those countries trapping countries with white elephant projects like Sri Lanka has been trapped on some of the projects that the Chinese have built out there, which are unsustainable and which have caught them into a debt trap like situation. Without doing any of those things which have happened in many countries around the world, how do you address the developmental needs of the global South by bringing the global North in it and behaving and acting like a bridge between the two? So I think that is also a remarkable achievement. And finally, if you will allow me, although this has nothing to do with the G20, but that very, very epochal project, if I might call it, which is presenting this very, very grand alternative developmental view, which is this India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, and the fact that some of the most important European countries, the United States, Saudi Arabia and UAE, two of the most important countries in the region, they have all come together with India, and this project has been floated. Japan is also there. And I think this is this big alternative to the BRI, this predatory BRI project of the Chinese, which has not really benefited any country, which has in a sense even lost the Chinese money, because these were ill thought out projects. But what we are now going in for, hopefully, that should happen soon enough, are projects which will be sustainable, which will be profitable, which will generate wealth in the region, which will develop connectivity between continents, between regions. And I think, again, the audacity of ambition of those projects, the vision which is brought on by all these countries to come up with these kind of projects, I think it's a remarkable achievement.
We'll talk about the audacity of vision that you just spoke about, but I'm just speechless looking at these pictures. Bharat Mandapam looking resplendent with the lights on, and people who are wondering what's on the menu. I can tell you it's a 4-course pure vegetarian meal. Millet-based dishes also on the menu, and silverware utensil will be used. 170 guests on the list. We'll talk about it taking a quick break. Viewers, stay with Times Now. India, good evening. This is Times Now. Look at these pictures coming to you from Bharat Mandapam in the heart of the national capital, Delhi. World leaders, one by one, arriving for the presidential dinner. Prime Minister Modi also there to welcome them. We have with us Professor Nalapat, Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Sushant Sareen. Professor Nalapat, you know, when people say that peace comes through strength, how do you see that in context of what Prime Minister Modi said today by saying this is not an era of war?
Well, look, if one were to try and connect the dots, let me tell you what dots I will be looking at and what I'd like to connect, and possibly when the history of this conference is written later, because frankly, what has happened is historic. Since 2014, there has really not been this kind of unanimity between Russia and the Western powers, especially the United States. 2014, that's many, many years ago. In my view, first of all, you have this very close relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Joe Biden. I believe that the Prime Minister would have talked to President Biden about the statement, about the need to have a united front, about the need for North and South to work together, and for all the different continents to work together. In my view, President Biden would then have been in touch with his European friends and his other friends in the G7. Of course, Japan and South Korea are very close to India. After that, in my view, and again, this is the dots will only be known after maybe possibly years. In my view, I do believe that there would have been contact between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, and basically nudging President Putin not to stand in the way of a unanimous acceptance of the Delhi Declaration. In which case, President Putin would have contacted President Xi. And remember, I think, I'm not sure, not on this channel, but when Qin Gang's resignation was announced, his disappearance as the foreign minister, I said this indicates becoming weaker. And Wang Yi's appointment, Wang Yi is a party man. And it is in this context of Xi becoming weaker, because Xi would have liked to sabotage this summit. He would not have liked this kind of an agreed statement. But given the fact that we're looking at an era where Xi is weaker since Qin Gang disappeared, who was Xi's man, and was replaced by the CCP man, Wang Yi. I do believe that collective leadership said, why make an enemy out of India more than what we have already made? And why annoy President Putin, who has told us, and look, that he would like to go along with Prime Minister Modi. And I think that's how this unanimity was secured at the top. Frankly, this is absolutely historic in a geopolitical context, and I believe it happened at the top. Later on, when the dots are connected, I may be proved right that first to the PM Modi to Biden, Biden to the G7 and to the EU, then PM Modi to Putin, Putin to weaken Xi Jinping, and that's how all these different countries. Remember, the G20 was a fractured organization, G18 and G2. And this, today, we are seeing the G20 back. How unique is that? How rare is that in these times? So in my view, this is what happened. And I think full credit to the fact that Prime Minister Modi has the best of relations with President Biden and President Putin,
right,
neither of whom have a very good relationship with each other, as we all know.
Okay, Professor Nalapat, stay on with us. Rishabh now joining us from inside the Bharat Mandapam. Rishabh, the stage is set for diplomatic dinner hosted by President Murmu.
Well, definitely, yes, the stage is set and the leaders have started arriving. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is personally introducing all the visiting dignitaries to the President of India, President Draupadi Murmu. And, this is one of the largest grouping coming together for an informal dinner. We have seen a diplomatic coup earlier today where India, even after all the apprehensions that there cannot be a joint declaration, India got joint declaration released, adopted and agreed upon. 83 paras, all 83 paras agreed upon. So that was a diplomatic coup that has happened earlier today, and now a celebration of the victory of India's G20 presidency. When India took over, G20 was a fractured grouping. The world press nullified India's presidency, and now today, 10 months later, we have the joint statement coming out, agreed upon by others.
And Bharat's heritage on complete display. The Bharat Mandapam there from Konark Wheel to this backdrop on your screen. We're taking a short break. Call our guest and Rishabh stay with Times Now viewers.